March 12 was a bright cold Sunday morning. Bernie Yavich stepped out of his car and went into the Franklin County Jail, feeling very strange about it all. It would be the first time as a prosecutor that he had ever been present while the defendant was being examined by psychiatrists. He had gone through the report from Southwest and over the police reports again and again, but he had no idea what to expect. He just couldn't believe that all these eminent doctors were taking the multiple personality thing seriously. Cornelia Wilbur coming down to examine Milligan didn't impress him. She believed in it, and she'd be looking for it. It was Dr. George Harding's face he had to watch. As far as Yavich was concerned, there was no more highly respected psychiatrist in the state of Ohio. He knew no one would pull anything on Dr. Harding. Many of the leading prosecutors, who had little or no respect for psychiatrists testifying in insanity cases, said the one exception would be George Harding Jr. After a while, the others arrived, and they arranged to have the interview in the lower-level sheriff's squad room, a large room with folding chairs, blackboards, and a desk where the officers gathered at shift change. Yavich greeted Dr. Stella Carolyn and Shayla Porter, the social worker from Southwest, and was introduced to Doctors Wilbur and Harding. Then the door opened, and he saw Billy Milligan for the first time. Judy Stevenson walked beside him, holding his hand. Dorothy Turner walked in front. Gary walked behind. They entered the squad room, and Milligan, seeing the crowd of people, hesitated. Dorothy Turner introduced them one by one and then led him to the seat closest to Cornelia Wilbur. "Dr. Wilbur," Dorothy said in a low voice. "This is Danny." "Hello, Danny," Wilbur said. "I'm glad to meet you. How are you feeling?" "All right," he said, clinging to Dorothy's arm. "I know it must make you nervous to be in the room with a lot of strangers, but we're here to help you," Wilbur said. They took their seats and Schweikart leaned over and whispered to Yavich, "When you see this, if you still don't believe it, I'll turn my license in." As Wilbur started to question Milligan, Yavich relaxed. She looked to him like an attractive, energetic mother with bright red hair and bright red lipstick. Danny answered her questions and told her about Arthur and Ragan and Alan. She turned to Yavich. "You see, it's typical of multiple personalities that he's willing to speak of what happened to the others, but not about what happened to him." After a few more questions and answers, she turned to Dr. George Harding. "This is a clear example of the dissociative state of the hysterical neurotic." Danny looked at Judy and said, "She left her spot." Judy smiled and whispered, "No, Danny, it's not like that with her." "She must have a lot of people inside her," Danny insisted. "She talks to me one way, and then she changes and starts using all those big words like Arthur does." "I wish Judge Flowers were here to see this," Wilbur said. "I know what's going on inside this young man. I know what he really needs." Danny's head snapped around, glaring at Dorothy Turner accusingly. "You told her. You promised you wouldn't, but you told." "No, Danny," Turner said. "I didn't. Dr. Wilbur knows what's wrong because she knows other people like you." In a firm but soft voice, Cornelia Wilbur put Danny at ease. She looked into his eyes and told him to relax. She held her left hand up to her forehead, and her diamond ring glinted and reflected in his eyes. "You're totally relaxed and feeling good now, Danny. Nothing is bothering you. Relax. Whatever you feel like doing or saying is all right. Anything you want." "I want to leave," Danny said. "I want to get off the spot. Whatever you want to do is all right with us, Danny. I'll tell you what. When you leave, I'd like to talk to Billy. The Billy who was born with that name." He shrugged. "I can't make Billy come. He's asleep. Arthur and Ragan are the only ones who can wake him up." "Well, you tell Arthur and Ragan that I have to talk to Billy. It's very important." Yavich watched in growing astonishment as Danny's eyes went blank. His lips moved, his body jerked erect, and then he looked around and dazed. He said nothing at first and then asked for a cigarette. Dr. Wilbur gave him one as he settled back. Judy Stevenson whispered to Yavich that the only one who smoked cigarettes was Alan. Wilbur once again introduced herself, and the people in the room who hadn't met Alan before and Yavich marveled at how changed Milligan seemed, how relaxed and outgoing. He smiled and spoke earnestly and fluently, very different from the shy, boyish Danny. Alan answered her questions about his interests. He played the piano and the drums, he said, and painted, mostly portraits. He was 18 and loved baseball, though Tommy hated the game. "All right, Alan," Wilbur said. "I'd like to talk to Arthur now." "Yeah? Okay," Alan said. "Wait. I... Yevich stared as Alan took a couple of quick, deep puffs of the cigarette before leaving. It seemed so spontaneous, such a small detail, to take those final drags before Arthur, who didn't smoke cigarettes, emerged. Again the eyes went blank, the lids fluttered. He opened them, leaned back, gazed around with a naughty expression, and put his fingertips together, forming a pyramid. When he spoke, it was with an upper-class British accent. Yavich frowned as he listened. He found himself actually seeing and hearing a new person talking to Dr. Wilbur. Arthur's eyes contact, his body language, were obviously different from Alan's. A friend of Yavich's, an accountant in Cleveland, was British, and Yavich was amazed at the resemblance, the authentic speech pattern. "I don't believe I've met these people," Arthur said. He was introduced around, and Yavich felt silly greeting Arthur as if he had just walked into the room. When Wilbur asked Arthur about the others, he described their roles and explained who would or would not be allowed to come out. Finally, Dr. Wilbur said, "We must speak with Billy." It is very dangerous to wake him," Arthur said. "He's quite suicidal, you know. It's very important that Dr. Harding get to meet him. The outcome of the trial could depend upon it. Freedom and treatment, or else prison." Arthur thought about it, pursed his lips, and said, "Well, really, I'm not the one to decide. Since we are in a prison, a hostile environment, Ragan is dominant, and only he makes the final decision about who does and does not come on the spot." "What is Ragan's role in your lives?" she asked. "Ragan is a protector and the keeper of hate." "All right then," Dr. Wilbur said sharply. "I must speak to Ragan." "Madam, I suggest that... Arthur, we don't have much time. A lot of busy people have given up their Sunday morning to come down here and help you. Ragan must agree to let Billy talk to us." Again the face went blank, eyes staring, trance-like. Lips moved as if in an inner unheard conversation. Then the jaw tightens and his brow furrowed deeply. "Is not possible," growled the deep Slavic voice. "What do you mean?" Wilbur asked. "Is not possible to speak with Billy." "Who are you?" "I am Ragan Vedaskovich. Who are these people?" Dr. Wilbur introduced everyone, and Yevich wondered again at the change, at the striking Slavic accent. He wished he knew some phrases in Yugoslavian or Serbo-Croatian, to see if it was just the accent or if Ragan could understand the language. He wished Dr. Wilbur would probe into that. He wanted to mention it, but they had all been asked not to speak beyond the introduction. Dr. Wilbur asked Ragan, "How did you know I wanted to speak to Billy?" Ragan nodded with a mild amusement. "Arthur asks my opinion, and I am opposed. Is my right as protector to decide who comes on spot. Not possible for Billy to come out." "And why not?" "You are a doctor." "No. Let me put it this way. Is impossible, because if Billy wakes, he will kill himself." "How can you be sure of that?" He shrugged. "Each time Billy comes on spot, he thinks he is do something bad, and he tries to kill himself. Is my responsibility? I say no." "What are your responsibilities?" "To protect all, especially the young ones." "I see. And you have never failed in your duties? The young ones have never been hurt or felt pain because you've protected them from it?" "Not exactly true. David feels pain. And you let David take the pain? Is his purpose. A big, strong man like you, letting a child bear all that pain and suffering? Dr. Wilbur, I'm not one to... You ought to be ashamed of yourself, Ragan. Now I don't think you should set yourself up as an authority. I am a medical doctor, and I have treated cases like this before. I think I should be the one to decide if Billy can come out. Certainly not someone who lets a defenseless child bear the pain when he is around to take some of it on his own shoulders. Ragan shifted in his seat, looking embarrassed and guilty. He mumbled that she didn't understand the situation at all, but her voice went on, softly but sharply persuasive. "All right," he said. "You are responsible, but all men must first leave the room. Billy is afraid of men because of what his father did to him." Gary, Bernie, Yavich, and Dr. Harding rose to leave the room, but Judy spoke up. "Ragan, it's very important that Dr. Harding be allowed to stay and see Billy. You have to trust me. Dr. Harding is very interested in the medical aspects of this case, and he's got to be allowed to stay." "We'll go out," Gary said, pointing to himself and Yavich. Ragan looked around the room, evaluating the situation. "I permit," he said, pointing to a chair in the far corner of the large room. "But he must sit back there and stay." George Harding, looking uncomfortable, smiled weakly. He nodded and sat down in the corner. "And not move," Ragan said. "I won't." Gary and Bernie Yavich went out into the corridor, and Gary said, "I've never met the core personality, Billy. I don't know if he'll come out. But what's your reaction to what you've seen and heard?" Yavich sighed. "I started out very skeptical. Now I don't know what to think. But I don't think it's an act." Those who remained in the room watched closely as Milligan's face paled. His gaze seemed to turn inward. His lips twitched as if he were talking in his sleep. Suddenly his eyes opened wide. "Oh my God," he cried. "I thought I was dead." He jerked around in his seat, seeing people looking at him. He jumped out of the chair onto the floor on all fours and scuttled crab-like to the opposite wall, as far from them as he could, squeezing between the writing armrests of two chairs, covering and sobbing. "What did I do now?" With a gentle but firm voice, Cornelia Wilbur said, "You did nothing wrong, young man. There is nothing for you to be upset about." He was quivering, pressing himself back into the wall as if trying to go through it. His hair had fallen into his eyes, and he peered through it, making no attempt to brush it back. "I realize you don't know it, Billy, but everyone in this room is here to help you. Now I think you should get off the floor and sit in that chair so we can talk to you." It became apparent to everyone in the room that Wilbur was in control and knew exactly what she was doing, touching the right mental buttons to make him respond. He got up and sat in the chair, knees jiggling anxiously, body shaking. "I ain't dead." "You are very much alive, Billy, and we know you're having problems and you need help. You do need help, don't you?" He nodded, wide-eyed. "Tell me, Billy, why did you smash your head into the wall the other day?" "I thought I was dead," he said, "and then I woke up and found myself in jail." "What was the last thing you remember before that?" "Going up to the school roof. I didn't want to see any more doctors. Dr. Brown at the Lancaster Mental Health Center couldn't cure me. I thought I jumped off. Why ain't I dead? Who are all of you? Why are you looking at me like that?" "We're doctors and lawyers, Billy. We're here to help you." "Doctors? Daddy Chell will kill me if I talk to you." "Why, Billy?" "He doesn't want me to tell what he done to me." Wilbur looked questioningly at Judy Stevenson. "He's adoptive father," Judy explained. "His mother divorced Chalmer Milligan 6 years ago." Billy stared around him, dumbfounded. "Divorced? 6 years?" He touched his face as if to be sure it was real. "How's that possible?" "We have a lot to talk about, Billy," said Wilbur. "A lot of missing pieces to put together." He looked around wildly. "How did I get here? What's going on?" He began to sob and rock back and forth. "I know you're tired now, Billy," Wilbur said. "You can go back and rest now." Suddenly the crying stopped. The expression on his face turned instantly into an alert but confused state. He touched the tears running down his face, and he frowned. "What's going on here? Who was that? I heard someone crying, but I didn't know where it was coming from. Jesus! Whoever he was just about to run and crash himself into the wall. Who is he?" "That was Billy," Wilbur said. "The original Billy, sometimes known as a host or core personality. Who are you?" "I didn't know Billy was allowed out. No one told me. I'm Tommy." Gary and Bernie Yavich were permitted back into the room, and Tommy was introduced to everyone, asked a few questions, and taken back to his cell. When Yavich heard what had happened in their absence, he shook his head. It all seemed so unreal, like bodies possessed by spirits or demons. He said to Gary and Judy, "I don't know what it means, but I guess I'm with the rest of you. He doesn't seem to be faking." Only Dr. George Harding was non-committal. He was reserving judgment, he said. He had to think about what he'd heard and seen. The next day he would write his opinion for Judge Flowers. Russ Hill, the medic who had brought Tommy back upstairs, had no idea what was wrong with Milligan. All he knew was that there were a lot of doctors and lawyers coming and going to see this patient, and that he was a very changeable young man who could draw good pictures. A few days after the big Sunday meeting, he passed by the cell and saw Milligan drawing. He picked through the bars and saw a very childish line drawing with some words printed on it. A guard came up and started to laugh. "Hell, my 2-year-old draws better than that goddamn rapist." "Leave him alone," Hill said. The guard had a glass of water in his hand, and he flung it through the bars, wetting the drawing. "What did you do that for?" Hill said. "What the hell is wrong with you?" But the guard who had thrown the water drew away from the bars when he saw the expression on Milligan's face. The rage was unmistakable. He seemed to be looking around for something to throw. Suddenly the prisoner grabbed the toilet bowl, ripped it out of the wall, and threw it against the bars, shattering the porcelain. The guard stumbled back and ran to hit the alarm button. "Jesus, Milligan," Hill said. "He threw water on Christine's drawing. It's not right to destroy the work of children." 6 officers burst into the corridor, but by that time they found Milligan sitting on the floor with a dazed expression on his face. "You're gonna pay for that, you son of a bitch," the guard shouted. "That's county property." Tommy sat back against the wall, put his hands behind his head arrogantly and said, "Fuck county property." In a letter dated March 13, 1978, Dr. George Harding Jr. wrote to Judge Flowers, "Based upon the interview, it is my opinion that William S. Milligan is not competent to stand trial due to his inability to cooperate with his attorney in his own defense, and that he lacks the emotional integration necessary to be able to testify in his own defense, to confront witnesses and to maintain an effective psychological presence in court beyond his mere physical presence." Dr. Harding now had to make another decision. Both Schweigert and Yavich had asked him to go beyond the competency evaluation and request that Harding Hospital admit Milligan for evaluation and treatment. George Harding struggled with his decision. He'd been impressed that Prosecutor Yavich had been at that interview. A most unusual thing for a prosecutor to do, Harding thought. Schweigert and Yavich had assured him that he would not be placed in an adversarial role for the defense or for the prosecution, but that both sides would agree in advance that his report would go into the trial record by stipulation. How could he resist when both sides were asking this of him? As medical director of Harding Hospital, he presented the request to the hospital administrator and the finance officer. "We've never turned away from difficult problems," he told them. "Harding Hospital doesn't accept just the easy cases. On the basis of George Harding's strong recommendation that this would be an opportunity for the staff to learn as well as for the hospital, to make a contribution to psychiatric knowledge, the committee agreed to admit William Milligan for the 3 months mandated by the court. On March 14th, Hill and another officer came to get Milligan. "They want you downstairs," the guard said, "but the sheriff says you got to go into Straits." Milligan put up no resistance while they fastened the jacket on him and led him from the cell to the elevator. Downstairs, Gary and Judy were waiting in the corridor, eager to tell their client they had good news for him. When the elevator door opened, they saw Russ Hill and the guard looking on in open-mouthed amazement as Milligan stepped out of the straitjacket, almost freeing himself completely. "It's impossible," the guard said. "I told you it wouldn't hold me, and no jail or hospital can hold me either." "Tommy?" Judy asked. "Damn right," he snorted. "Come on in here," said Gary, pulling him into the conference room. "We've got to talk." Tommy shook his arm loose from Gary's grip. "What's the matter?" "Good news," Judy said. Gary said, "Dr. George Harding has offered to accept you at Harding Hospital for pre-trial observation and treatment." "What does that mean?" "One of two things can happen," Judy explained. "Either at some future time you'll be declared competent and a trial date will be set, or after a certain period you'll be ruled incompetent to stand trial, and the charges will be dismissed. The prosecution agreed to it, and Judge Flowers has ordered you removed from here and sent to Harding Hospital next week, on one condition." Tommy said, "There is always a condition." Gary leaned forward and jabbed at the table with his forefinger. Dr. Wilbur told the judge that multiple personalities keep their promises. She knows how important promises are to all of you. So, Judge Flowers says if you'll promise not to try to escape from Harding Hospital, you can be released and sent there right away. Tommy crossed his arms. "Shit, I'm not promising that." "You've got to go," Gary shouted. "Jesus, we've been working our tails off to keep you from being sent to Lima, and now you take this attitude?" "Well, it's not right," Tommy said. "Escaping is the one thing I do best. That's one of the main reasons I'm here. I'm being denied the use of my talents." Gary ran his fingers through his hair as if he wanted to pull it out. Judy put her hand on Tommy's arm. "Tommy, you've got to give us your promise. If not for yourself, you've got to do it for the children, the little ones. You know this is a bad place for them. They'll be cared for at Harding Hospital." He uncrossed his arms and stared at the table, and Judy knew she had touched the right nerve. She had come to understand that the other personalities had a deep love and a sense of responsibility for the younger ones. "All right," he said reluctantly. "I promise." What Tommy did not tell her was that when he first heard that he might be transferred to Lima, he had bought a razor blade from a trustee. Right now it was taped to the sole of his left foot. There was no reason to tell because no one had asked him. He had learned long ago that when you are transferred from one institution to another, you always bring along a weapon. He might not be able to break his promise by escaping, but at least he could defend himself if someone tried to rape him, or else he could give it to Billy and let him cut his own throat. 4 days before the scheduled transfer to Harding Hospital, Sergeant Willis came down to the cell. He wanted Tommy to show him how he managed to get out of the straitjacket. Tommy looked at the lean, balding officer with the gray hair framing his dark complexion and said with a frown, "Why should I?" "You're living here anyway," Willis said. "I figure I'm not too old to learn something new." "You've been okay to me, Sergeant," Tommy said, "but I don't give up my secrets that easy." "Look at it this way. You could help save someone's life." Tommy had turned away, but now he looked up, curious. "How is that?" "You're not sick, I know that, but we've got other people in here who are. We put them in straits to protect them. If they got out, they might kill themselves. If you show me how you do it, we could prevent other people from doing it. You'd be saving lives." Tommy shrugged to show that didn't concern him. But the next day he showed Sergeant Willis his trick of taking off the straitjacket. Then he taught him how to put it on a person in such a way that he could never get out of it. Late that night, Judy got a call from Dorothy Turner. "There is another one," Turner said. "Another what?" "Another personality we didn't know about. A 19-year-old girl named Adalana." "Oh my God," Judy whispered. "That makes 10." Dorothy described her late-night visit to the jail, how she had seen him sitting on the floor and heard him talking in a soft voice about needing love and affection. Dorothy had sat beside him, comforting him, wiping away his tears. Then Adalana talked of writing poetry in secret. She explained tearfully that only she had the ability to wish any of the others off the spot. Only Arthur and Christine, up to now, had known of her existence. Judy tried to imagine the scene, Dorothy sitting on the floor, hugging Milligan. "Why did she choose to reveal herself now?" Judy asked. "Adalana blames herself for what happened to the boys," Dorothy said. "She's the one who stole the time from Ragan at the time of the rapes." "What are you saying?" "Adalana said she did it because she was desperate to be held and caressed and loved." "Adalana did the—" "Adalana's lesbian." When Judy hung up, she stared at the telephone for a long time. Her husband asked her what the call was about. She opened her mouth to tell him, but then she shook her head and instead turned out the light.